The halls of the Red Keep were colder than the north that morning, not in temperature, but in the air of betrayal that lingered like fog. Lord Eddard Stark stood in the chambers that once belonged to his friend Robert Baratheon, now silent and lifeless. Ned held the parchment with Robert's last words, still stained by ink and sorrow. But his mind wasn't on paper, was on choice. Renly Baratheon stood across from him, the youngest of the Baratheon brothers, bold and eager. "Ned, we don't have time for hesitation," he said, pacing like a caged lion. "Cersei will not honor Robert's will. She crowned Joffrey. The moment Robert draws his last breath, and you, your head, will be the first to fall." Ned stared at him, weary from days without sleep. "Renly, you are not the rightful heir. Stannis is older," Renly scoffed, "and Stannis is hated by half the realm. He has no charm, no allies. I have the Reach, I have the Stormlands, and I can have the city before Cersei makes her move." Ned had always been a man of honor. In another life, he would have refused, but the weight of his daughters, Sansa, still clinging to dreams. Arya wild and Lostan, the smell of blood in the air made him pause. Honor had already cost Robert his life. Would it now cost him his family? "What would you have me do?" Ned asked at last. Renly's face lit up like fire catching dry wood. "We move tonight. My men already number 5,000 in the city. Yours from the north will arrive within the week. We seize the throne room, imprison Cersei and her children, and secure the city. No blood, if we act fast." "And what of Littlefinger?" Renly's smile faded. "He's already picked a side, and it's not yours. Trust me, Stark'll sell you for a bag of silver." Ned nodded. "Then we act." That night, the Red Keep shuddered. Renly's knights, dressed in gold cloaks, borrowed from bribed. Members of the City Watch swept through the castle like a tide. Cersei was taken from her bedchambers along with Joffrey and Tommen. Myrcella, young and unaware, cried as she was pulled from her bed, unaware of the storm her family had created. When the sun rose, the Iron Throne did not belong to Joffrey. It did not yet belong to anyone, but the Lannisters were in chains, and Lord Eddard Stark stood in the throne room beside Renly Baratheon, the direwolf and the stag side by side. Renly turned to the gathered lords. "My brother Robert is dead. His son Joffrey is a bastard born of incest. This is no longer a secret. The realm needs a king." Murmurs passed among the courtiers like wind through dry leaves. Mace Tyrell, Renly's future father-in-law, stepped forward first. "The Reach stands with you, my lord." Varys said nothing, but bowed with a sly look in his eyes. Pycelle, red-faced and trembling, fell to his knees. Ned stood still, grim as stone. "I name Renly Baratheon, King of the Seven Kingdoms," he said finally, voice steady, "and I will serve as hand until the realm is safe once more." There was no joy in his voice, only duty. That day, the war that might have split Westeros began and ended within 24 hours. Joffrey never drew Ned's blood. Littlefinger never had a chance to betray him. And yet, in the dungeons of the Red Keep, Cersei sat in silence, whispering of vengeance. Her eyes burned not with fear but with hatred. Renly, despite his charm and ambition, had never been tested by the weight of a crown. And as the days passed, his courtiers grew fat with power. Parties replaced war councils. Coins flowed like rivers, and Ned Stark, the only man trying to hold back the tide, soon found himself drowning in decisions. Messages from Dragonstone came like arrows dipped in fire. Stannis Baratheon would not recognize Renly. He declared himself the one true king and worse, he had something or someone dark behind him. A red priestess whose eyes glowed like embers in the dark. Winter was still coming. But now it would come to a realm at peace and a court on the edge of chaos. The raven from Dragonstone arrived soaked in rain, its black feathers slick and trembling from flight. The note it carried was brief, but sharp as a dagger's tip. Renly Baratheon is a usurper. The throne is mine by birthright. I will take it in fire and fury. It bore the seal of Stannis, Baratheon, unmistakable and unyielding. Ned stood in the council chamber, the letter open on the table before him. Around him, the newly formed small council bickered Renly's chosen men, most of whom had never seen a battlefield. Mace Tyrell was preoccupied with wedding arrangements. Cialoras, the Knight of Flowers, demanded they confront Stannis immediately. Varys, as always, watched and waited. Stannis has no support in the capital, Loras said sharply. We should ride to Storm's End and take the fight to him before he gathers men, and bring war to the realm we just saved. Ned's voice cut through the room. Stannis is Robert's elder brother. He may be stubborn, but he's not a fool. We should try to speak with him first. Renly leaned back in his throne, one leg crossed casually, but the glint in his eyes revealed discomfort. Ned, I respect your counsel, but Stannis won't talk. He won't bend the knee knot to me, and not to you. He never forgave Robert for naming me Lord of Storm's End, let alone skipping him for the throne. Ned looked around the room. Then what are we? Conquerors? Rebels? If we don't attempt peace first, we're no better than the Lannisters. The room fell quiet. Varys gave a faint, almost approving nod. I'll send a raven, Ned said. Let's give him the chance to meet us on neutral ground. At least, pretend we are better than the snakes that filled this keep before us. Renly muttered, We don't have the luxury of time, Stark. You bought yourself a crown in a single night, Your Grace, Ned replied, not hiding the steel in his voice. Give me 1 day for peace. Renly said nothing, but he didn't stop the raven from flying. That night, Ned walked the corridors of the Red Keep, the stone walls whispering old secrets. Arya had been found and returned to his chambers with her usual scowling defiance. Sansa, now aware of Joffrey's lies and the truth of her captivity, remained distant. She refused to look her father in the eye. She loved him, Catelyn had once warned Ned, the way young girls love fairy tales. Now the fairy tale was over. He visited the black cells before dawn. Cersei sat behind bars, regal even in filth. Her golden hair was tangled, her dress torn, but her pride was untouched. You've won, Lord Stark, she said with a smile. That chilled him, but you've made an enemy of fire and blood. Your children are alive. They will be treated fairly. They are not yours to speak for. She stood and stepped toward the bars, her voice lowering to a venomous whisper. You think you've saved the realm, but you've only paused, it's burning. Stannis will not forgive, and when he falls, the dragons will rise. Ned stiffened. Dragons are dead. Her smile deepened. Are they? He left her in the dark. By the next evening, a raven returned from Dragonstone. Stannis agreed to meet under strict terms at the ruins of Summerhall, a place soaked in the blood of old kings, a neutral ground, if ever there was one. But as Ned prepared for the journey, word came from the north. A raven bearing the Stark sigil carried grim news. Benjen was missing beyond the wall, and worse strange things were stirring in the snow. Men disappearing, shadows moving, rangers returning half mad and still, Winter crept closer. Ned read the letter twice, heart heavy with unease. He had fought to keep the realm from falling into chaos, but the true war, the one no crown could stop, was already stirring, and he was needed in too many places at once. The winds at Summerhall carried more than dust and memory. They carried tensions, so thick even the guards flinched with every gust. The ruins stood like skeletons of a forgotten age, where kings once dreamed of dragons reborn and paid in blood. For it now, another kind of fire brewed. Ned Stark arrived with a modest escort of northern bannermen, cautious and grim. Renly, despite Ned's protests, came draped in royal colours, flanked by Tyrell knights and Seer Laurers, shining like he already ruled the Seven Kingdoms. On the other side of the crumbled courtyard, Stannis stood in black and red, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing not with ambition but conviction. Beside him stood a woman Ned had never seen before at all, red-haired, her presence so cold it seemed to burn. "Melisandre, I thank you for coming." "Lord Stannis," Ned began, breaking the long silence. "And I ask only for words before swords." "There is nothing to discuss," Stannis said flatly. "My brother sits on a throne that is mine by right. He is no king. You support a lie, Stark." Renly stepped forward, his smile carefully shaped. "Brother, if you truly want peace, bend the knee and join me. I'll give you Storm's End, the fleet, a seat on my council. You would offer me scraps of what is mine," Stannis snapped. "You fornicate with Highgarden roses, while our family's legacy rots in the hands of bastards and traitors. And you," his eyes flicked to Ned, "you, Stark, betrayed my brother's wishes." "I honored his last words," Ned replied. "He asked for a regent. You were not in King's Landing. I did what I had to for peace." "There is no peace without justice," Stannis growled, "and justice starts with fire." Melisandre stepped forward at that, her voice a whisper, but it carried through the air like thunder. "The Lord of Light has seen the path. Renly's claim is smoke. You stand in the shadow of death and do not yet know it." Laura's reached for his sword. "Say that again," which Ned raised a hand, cutting through the chaos. "Enough. We are not here to kill each other, not yet." But instead, eyes, the conversation was already over. "I will not yield," Stannis said. "And when you fall, it will be by flame." Then he turned and walked away. Renly looked after him with disgust. "He'll come for us." Ned sighed. "And now we've confirmed it." They returned to King's Landing with heavy hearts. Within days, word came that Stannis had begun gathering ships, many of them. The lords of the narrow sea were answering his call. The faithless had found their flag. As Renly held court, he drowned in decisions. He wanted to throw balls, feasts, and parades. He wanted songs sung of his victory, statues carved before any battle was won. The Tyrells encouraged it, feeding the illusion of control while pushing their own people into key roles: governors, generals, coin counters. Mace Tyrell even suggested marrying Renly to Margaery immediately, before the realm had even fully accepted Renly as king. And in the shadows, Ned watched it all unfold with the unease of a man watching a fire grow behind a paper wall. Meanwhile, the north called. Another raven came, this time from Maester Luwin. Winterfell was bracing for a harsh early frost, and the Night's Watch had sent another urgent plea. The White Walkers, once myth, were stirring. Benjen was still lost. The wall needed Menand eyes. Ned faced Renly that evening. "My place is in the north," he said. "I came south to honor my friend Robert, to stop blood from flooding these halls. But winter is truly coming, and the realm's focus must shift. Renly blinked. You would abandon your post, leave your king. I would not abandon anything, Ned said. But I will not stay and watch court games while my people freeze and die. Your hand of the king, Ned, and I'll name someone in my stead, someone who still believes there's honor left to protect in this city. Renly didn't respond, but the look in his eyes told Ned the alliance was growing fragile. 2 weeks later, Eddard Stark left King's Landing under heavy guard. He did not trust the city to see him off in peace. The last thing he saw was Cersei Lannister staring down from her tower window, a phantom wrapped in silence. In her cell, she had been plotting, and Westeros was about to learn just how far a lioness would go to protect her pride. The North welcomed Ned Stark with snow underfoot and silence in the skies. It had only been months since he left, but the air had changed. It bit harder now, and not just from the cold. It was the kind of tension that lived in the bones of old men and in the dreams of restless children. Winterfell stood tall, but its warmth had faded. Robb, no longer a boy, met his father at the gates, his grey eyes harder than Ned remembered. The bannermen had started gathering. Rumors of war had reached even the frozen corners of the north. And yet, it wasn't southern swords they feared most. The Night's Watch sent another raven, Robb told him that night, seated before the roaring hearth. They say the wildlings are stirring, and worse things they don't have names for. Ned nodded slowly. I've seen such winters before, but this one feels different. He read the letters from Castle Black again. Rangers vanishing, bodies returning with blue eyes and no breath, whispers of shadows in the snow. And through it all, silence from beyond the wall. Benjen was still missing, and so were 5 other men who had ridden out with him. Ned made the decision quickly. I'm going to the wall, he told Robb. Not as a lord, not as a Stark, just a man. I need to see with my own eyes what's coming. You've only just returned, Robb said, frustration in his voice. We need you here. The lords are restless. They're asking why the North bends to a southern king at all. And that's exactly why I must go, Ned replied. Because while they squabble over thrones and titles, something far worse is waking in the dark. If I can bring back proof, then perhaps they'll stop talking and start listening. Robb didn't like it, but he understood. He always had, more than Ned ever gave him credit for. Before leaving, Ned visited the Godswood. The weirwood tree stood as it always had, ancient, watching, bleeding its red sap like a silent warning. Catelyn joined him there, her hand cold in his. You saved the realm from the Lannisters, she whispered. Now you'll go save it again from monsters we don't even believe in. Ned gave her a tired smile. Let's hope I come back with a story no one dares ignore. With a small escort, he rode for the wall. The journey was long, bitter, and quiet. Snow fell heavier the farther north they rode. The world shrank into grey and white. And finally, they saw Ither Wall, rising like a jagged scar across the end of the world. Castle Black was no longer just a post for the exiled and forgotten. It was a fortress under siege by fear. The men of the Night's Watch stood watch, with eyes wide, hands on sword hilts, even when off duty. Lord Commander Geo Mormont received Ned with a firm grip and a face carved by concern. You shouldn't have come, he said, but I'm damned glad you did. They spoke for hours, of rangers gone missing, of ghost stories that now walked with flesh and blue eyes, of bodies that rose and attacked their own brothers in the night. Mormont showed him the hand severed, blackened, twitching even after death. It belonged to one of the rangers who had come back and tried to kill. "This isn't wildlings," Mormont said grimly. "This is something older, something colder." Ned listened. Then he rode north with a small scouting party to find the missing rangers, or what was left of them. They found what they weren't ready for. 3 days beyond the wall, at the edge of a clearing ringed by pines, they found the camp. Tents torn, blood frozen in strange spiral patterns. No bodies, just footprints that stopped. In the middle of the snow, that night, Ned saw them, tall figures moving between the trees, eyes glowing like blue coals. Silent, slow, deathless. The others, they didn't attack. Not yet. They only watched. And Ned Stark understood, at last, the truth. Westeros was preparing for the wrong war. The march back to Castle Black was silent. No one spoke of what they had seen. Words failed them, not out of fear, but out of sheer disbelief. Even Ned Stark, a man grounded in honor and reason, found himself grasping at thoughts that felt more like fevered dreams. He didn't sleep on the return journey. His hand rarely left the hilt of his sword. The others, those pale, watching figures, had made no move, but their presence lingered like frostbite beneath the skin. Ned kept hearing the silence of the woods, how even the wind had seemed afraid to blow when they appeared. At Castle Black, he wasted no time. Maester Aemon was summoned, along with Lord Commander Mormont and a few trusted senior officers of the Watch, behind locked doors. Ned told them what he'd seen. They stood between the trees, he said quietly, as if the memory might hear him. They watched, they didn't move. But I swear to the old gods, they were waiting. For what? Mormont asked, his voice grave. For us to forget them again, Ned replied. Maester Aemon sat still, the firelight catching the wet gleam in his blind eyes. If they've returned, then the stories were not stories. Mormont nodded slowly. We need men, more than we've ever had. You won't get them from the south, Ned said. They're too busy feeding their own egos. But he had a plan now, a purpose greater than lords and crowns. If he returned south with the truth, with proof, he could change the direction of the realm. He would make them listen. He sent ravens that night, one to Renly, now surrounded by flowers and flatterers in the capital, one to Stannis, who would dismiss it outright, and one to Winterfell. He wrote to Robb, not as a lord, but as a father. If the banners must rise, let it be for life, not power. Guard the north. Do not chase southern glory while the true enemy watches us from the shadows. The response would take weeks, but time was the one thing they didn't have. Meanwhile, back in King's Landing, the truth was being twisted. Renly read the raven with raised eyebrows, then tossed it aside. More ghost stories from the wall. Why does Lord Stark insist on playing the role of frozen prophet? Mace Tyrell chuckled. The North has always been a land of tales. Let them keep their monsters. But Catelyn Stark, who had returned south to ensure peace between her husband and the crown, read the letter in silence. Her heart sank with every line. She didn't doubt Ned, not for a moment. Renly, flush with growing power and popularity, began making reckless moves. He sent forces to meet Stannis in the field, not to defend, but to destroy. He rejected all attempts at compromise. His eyes were on banners and loyalty oaths. He wore the crown like a child plays king, basking in attention while the Tyrells pulled invisible strings. And in the dungeons below, Cersei had not been idle. Despite her confinement, she still had loyalists' maids guards, a few minor lords who owed her favors. Gold always bought mouths, but more than that, she had her mind and her hate. She knew she could not win a war from her cell, but she could start one. The night the guard was changed, her cell door creaked open. A cloaked figure stepped inside and dropped to one knee. "My queen," he whispered. She smiled. That night, fires erupted in 3 different corners of King's Landing. Food stores, the docks, and the Sept of Baelor itself. Chaos spread like infection. The gold cloaks panicked. The small folk rioted. And amid it all, Cersei was nowhere to be found. She had vanished. Renly's court blamed enemies everywhere, Stannis. The remaining Lannister sympathizers, even northern spies. Panic clouded every council meeting. The Tyrells tightened their grip, Laura's pushing for blood. And far to the north, beyond the wall, the others were no longer content with watching. Small parties of wildlings began fleeing southward, terrified and half-mad. The Night's Watch intercepted some, only to find them wounded, ranting about, shadows with glowing eyes and blades of ice. Then came the first real warning. A watch outpost was found empty, every man missing. No blood, no struggle, just their gear left behind, frozen and undisturbed. Ned Stark stood at the edge of the forest and felt the cold creeping deeper than the wind. He stared into the snow-swept trees and understood what so few in the south did. The Game of Thrones was still being played, but winter had already won. The first move. Snow fell harder now. Not gently no longer, the delicate frost that whispered winter's coming, but a furious, biting storm that howled through Castle Black like a warning screamed in the old tongue. Ned Stark stood atop the wall, his cloak flapping violently, eyes scanning the endless white beyond. They were coming. No more shadows between trees. No more distant whispers. The others had begun to move. They hit the outpost near Greyguard last night, Lord Commander Mormont said grimly beside him. 12 men, gone. Only 1 returned without a tongue. And yet no one in the south cares, Ned muttered. They're too busy cutting each other's throats over a chair. Below, the Black Brothers were reinforcing gates, sharpening weapons, preparing for a war they barely believed in. The North had sent some men after Ned's call, but not nearly enough. And the South, nothing. No response from Renly. No reinforcements. No ravens, just silence, or worse, disbelief. Ned had sent one final letter, one last desperate message to every major lord in Westeros. His words were not political. They were a cry for unity. The dead no longer sleep, they walk. I have seen them. If we do not stand together now, there will be no realm left to rule. But the South had stopped listening. Back in King's Landing, Renly's crown sat heavier each day. Whispers of Cersei's escape had turned to fury when small folk claimed to see her walking freely in Old Town. Some said she had joined forces with Stannis. Others claimed she was forming her own rebellion. Renly scoffed at it all, retreating further into the comfort of his court, blind to the cracks spreading beneath his feet. Catelyn Stark, trapped in a court growing more erratic, finally broke. She demanded an audience. My husband risked his life to stop civil war and save this kingdom, she said, voice hard as ice. And now, when he tells you death itself is rising, you call him mad. Renly leaned back on the Iron Throne, eyes tired. What am I supposed to do, Lady Stark? Abandon my war with Stannis to chase shadows in the snow. They're not shadows, she said. They're coming. But he didn't listen. None of them did. Far to the east, Daenerys Targaryen received the letter to a message delivered by a tired crow of Westerosi, parchment and desperation. She read it once. Then again, her dragons stirred as if sensing the cold creeping into their destiny. She whispered to them, "Fire may yet be needed." Back at the wall, the first clash came in the dead of night. They heard no horns, no screams, only the silence breaking like glass. The first wave of whites came through the trees, silent and soulless, eyes like frozen moons, skin like ice-kissed parchment, and behind them, taller figures moved like death itself, blades of ice in hand. The others, Ned fought at the gate himself, Longclaw in hand. He hadn't held a sword in months, but the rhythm came back fast because it had to. One swing, then another. But it wasn't like fighting men. These things didn't scream, didn't bleed. They just kept coming. Fire worked. Dragonglass worked. Steel, it shattered on their bones. The battle wasn't just brutal, it was unnatural. By dawn, the Watch had lost 50 men, but they'd killed 2 of the others. And when they crumbled into icy shards, the fear that ruled Castle Black turned into something else, rage. Ned stood among the deadsome walking, some never rising again, and made a vow not to the gods, but to the north, to his blood, to every man and woman who would soon learn the truth the hard way. He would go south one last time, not as Hand of the King, not as Warden of the North, but as a witness to the end of peace, a messenger of winter, a man who had seen death and would no longer ask for permission to be believed. And if Renly, Stannis, Daenerys, or any other king or queen refused to unite, then winter would take the throne by force.